This is an organization that immediately touches your heart. It immediately becomes a part of you. It immediately becomes an organization, a group of people in a place that you really just can't leave behind because they're so very, very special because of what they do. So I want to thank you, Rachel, also, and for the entire committee and the board of GlamourGals for selecting me to receive this year's Spotlight Award. And thanks to all of you who came out tonight. We're still connecting. Some of us are here virtually. So many of us are here in person on this beautiful spring night. And I have to say that for an organization such as this one, that is built on the power of human connection, it's so important that we're all here together this evening. It means so much to me, and I think it's going to sustain us as well. Now, as I mentioned, my introduction to this organization came through Jill and came through Farah, but its mission has really particularly resonated within my own life. In early 2017, I left my post in the Obama administration, and like many, I thought I would do the standard cabinet member two-step, do a vacation and decompress, and then come back to New York and reconnect with my many friends and colleagues here, and immerse myself in my old life. But instead, I ended up spending about 2 years in my home state of North Carolina, managing health care for both my parents. And for those of you who've been down that road, you know that it's a learning experience every day. Whether you're a teen, whether you're older, whether you think you've mastered so many things in life, it's an entirely new experience. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the best thing I've ever done also. And I spent a lot of time in particular with my mother in the hospital and then later in a nursing home. And in that nursing home, in addition to spending almost every day with my own mom for months on end, actually, I discovered that my high school guidance counselor was actually living in the same assisted living facility. And I was able to say, not just to reconnect, but to thank someone who frankly has given me a start on life and never knew how important she was to me. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina in the 1970s. Schools were integrated, but the opportunities were really not evenly handed out the way that they should have been. And frankly, that's a challenge we still face today. And my guidance counselor, despite being from a generation and a type and a group that you might have thought would not have been my biggest cheerleader, instead was. But not just for me, for every child that she reached out to. And so to be able to sit with her and talk with her and thank her for that was frankly a blessing. And to be able to share my mother's own recovery during those years was a gift that I could never thank anyone enough for. And as you know, particularly those of you who are going through this wonderful organization, when you spend a lot of time with people who don't really have a lot of time left, you really learn what's important in life. You really learn what matters the most. It's not who you vote for. It's not where you live. It's not what your title is. It's not even how much money you have. It's who do you love and do they know it? Whose life have you touched and have you reached out and reconnected? And how have you reached out and helped someone in your days? And so for me, when I connected with GlamourGals and saw that this was an organization that was committed to making that experience open and real and visible and felt for so many young people, as I said, it never leaves you. It just never leaves you. So I was so moved to hear in particular how this organization transformed itself during the pandemic. Because as we all know, that was a time when the goal of this organization, connection, was probably its biggest casualty. For all of us, not just our seniors, I think we all felt the impact of loneliness, the impact of separation, the impact of losing the ability to reach out and touch the face of our loved one. And I don't think we've really quite grappled with that loss yet, because we feel it today. But this organization was able to transform itself because that's what happens when you have determined young people. They make things happen. They absolutely do. And transformation is really the term I have to use because Even though this organization is called Glamour Gals, as you can see, it encompasses everyone. But particularly for young women, and all of us as women, we transform ourselves so many times throughout our lives. We begin as girls. We become students. We become athletes. We become young women. We are friends. We are mothers and mother figures. We are bosses. We are caregivers. And ultimately elders ourselves. And sometimes we inhabit many of these roles all at the same time. And to the current participants and the alumni of Glamour Gals, I want to say to you that I see in you the beginning of all of our own transformations. And we all watch you with love, and we watch you with so much pride as you connect with those who are near the close of the circle of life. You are creating links stronger than you know. You're gaining lessons that will unfold before you for years to come. And it's indeed an honor to stand with an organization that supports all of these transformations for all of the young people that touch its doors. Because I have to tell you, if ever we needed transformational energy in our world and in our lives, it is now. It is absolutely now. Now, as we have begun to emerge from what we fervently hope is the last winter of our discontent, I know we're all feeling a little bit bruised, maybe, a little bit battered. Some of us may even be feeling a little broken inside. And as we look around the world, I have to tell you, many of us are stunned at what we are seeing. We're seeing things rise up again that we thought had been vanquished. Where did this come from? We see a world where authoritarianism seeks to rise again. There's a war in Eastern Europe, raising the specter of the global disintegration of peace. And in our own country, we see efforts every day to reverse significant rights from voting to choice. And just yesterday, in one of our beautiful cities, upstate New York, in Buffalo, New York, we saw the rising level of violence and hatred for others, rooted in this country's original sin. And we even see a desire to rewrite our history, our own American history that's made us who we are, in an apparent attempt to spare some people discomfort. Discomfort. Discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort's the spur toward change. Discomfort is the push towards greatness. How can we appreciate our achievements if we don't know what we overcame to have them? How can we hold them dear if we don't know how much they cost all of us? And I'm here to tell you, comfort, it's overrated. Really, if our forebears had been comfortable, there would have been no American Revolution. If they'd been comfortable, there would have been no push to abolish this country's original sin of slavery, and no ongoing fight for true equality. If they had been comfortable, there would have been no struggle for women's suffrage, and half this room would be sitting here wondering, when do I get to vote? If people had been comfortable, there would have been no civil rights movement. If our scientists had been comfortable, we wouldn't have conquered space. If our researchers and doctors had been comfortable, we wouldn't have the advances in medicine that have saved our lives, literally, today, from surgery to medicine to vaccines. Yes, I said it. Yeah, I went there. But all of those advances and more were made by those who set aside comfort, took on the challenges and the pain, the sacrifices necessary to push this country and its world toward its full potential. And I think that all of you who are affiliated with Glamour Gals, as you reach out and connect with seniors who again are looking back on the arc of their lives, when they talk to you about what means the most, they don't talk to you about comfort. They talk to you about making the choice to come to this country. They talk to you about the effort it took to build a family. They talk to you about the pride they see when they look at their children and grandchildren. They don't talk about comfort. They talk about their choices and the work they put in to make them happen. Now, of course, these are challenging times, and sometimes we do look around and really despair at what is happening. But what we are seeing, quite frankly, is in fact the almost inevitable backlash to the generations of progress that we've made. We see it as night follows day, as the darkness followed Reconstruction. Why is it so strong? Because of the power of the ideals it seeks to suppress, because of the power of the people behind those ideals that have made them real for so many people, because of the very progress that we have been made. And history shows us that some of our greatest advances have come after periods of intense opposition. And we see these seeds now. In Eastern Europe, the war in Ukraine has united and solidified a Ukrainian identity that did not exist before, that was not the intention, but is now there. The mouse that roared has pushed back the Russian bear and inspired the world. Our recent pandemic has inspired a generation of future healers, doctors and nurses, and those who want to connect with people in pain and suffering. And the push to erode human and civil rights has inspired a new generation of activists who refuse to sit back and be comfortable. And that's because progress has never been an easy road. It's never been easy to get where we are, to have what we have. It's always been a story of twists and turns and sometimes outright reversals. But we keep going. We push forward. And when we look down, we are further ahead than we were because of the choices that we make. Now tonight, we celebrate the human connections that we all crave. And if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that when we break those connections, that we lose more than we immediately know. We lose our connection to the social fabric. We lose sometimes our sense of empathy. Sometimes we even lose our joy. I know many in this room have felt the same anxiety and frustrations as we have tried to get through these past 2 years. And we wonder, how do we regain those things? Can we recover? Can we return to where we were? Why do we feel so broken? These losses go beyond just how we feel. We see it even in our current environment, the bubbling anxiety and discontent and rage and violence that seems to bleed out of almost every encounter that we hear about on the news. It is different. But it is partly because of the separations that we have endured that we are suffering those things. And I'll leave you with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, "I am convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other." And he was talking about the separation of segregation, a system of life in those days. But we've seen this impact due to the separation of our politics, our choice of news, but most recently, and frankly I think most harshly, this awful pandemic that has touched us all. But understand, we have a choice to make. We can stay separated, or we can look at organizations like this one and choose to connect. We can choose to reach out on that very individual human level that GlamourGals makes so real and makes so positive. There's no grand flourish that's going to restore our sense of peace and equilibrium. There's no one magic bullet that's going to save us. But we will get there. We can get there. We have come so far, and we will get back to ourselves again. And we will do it by practicing acts of kindness, however small, every day. And as you've done by coming here, we do it by choosing the connection, by choosing empathy, by choosing caring. And as we make our way back, and as we look at how bruised and battered some of us feel, I urge that we all be kind to each other. Take the opportunity to choose kindness. And I've given you one quote already. I'll close with just one more. One of my favorite philosophers is Reinhold Niebuhr. Many of you know him because he wrote the Serenity Prayer. It says so much to so many people, but one of my favorite quotes has always been one that speaks to me about the way in which we interact with each other. And he wrote, "Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in a lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. And no virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standard of our friend or foe as it is from our standpoint. And therefore, we must be saved by that final favor of love, which is forgiveness." As we go out onto this beautiful spring evening and rebuild our lives and rebuild our connections, let's bring love and faith and hope. But most importantly, let's bring a little bit of forgiveness for ourselves, for the people that we meet, for the people who are struggling just like we are. And we will get back to ourselves. I promise you that. I thank you so much for this award, but most of all, I thank you so much for caring about human connection and for moving forward based on that connection, based on that empathy, and based on love. Thank you so very much.